This is part 2 of the lesson for page 254. So some example problems from that page. And section 5-3 asked us to determine whether ratios are proportional or not. So to do that, typically what we do is we cross multiply. And the way that works is this. So we take 3/8 and we see if it equals 9/24. So we'll know if they're proportional if the cross products are equal. So cross products, what are those? Well, that's when we take these two numbers, the 3 and the 24, and multiply them. So we go 3 times by 24, and then we do the same thing with these two numbers, 8 and 9. They call them cross products because product means to multiply, and they are, well, across from each other, diagonal from each other, I guess. And so 8 times 9. And so right away I see 3 times 24. Does that equal 72? Well, off to the side I'd end up having to multiply that out and see if it does. So 24 times by 3, well, it does make a 2 at the end. Yes, it does. It makes 72. So 3 times by 24 is 72. And this does equal, I know 8 and 9, that makes 72 as well. So yes, these two are proportional. So that would be my answer for number 7. Well, for number 8, what I would do is the same sort of thing. I would take the cross product, so 3/4. So I'm going to rewrite that as a fraction, set it equal to 8/9. See if these numbers equal or not. So again, we're doing cross products, so we're looking at the numbers diagonal from each other and multiplying. So 3 times by 9, and I'm going to see if that equals the 4 multiplied by the 8. So 4 times by 8. Well, these numbers aren't so bad. They're smaller, so we could probably figure them out. So 3 and 9 make 27. Well, let's see if it equals 4 times 8. Oh, 4 times 8, no, that makes 32. These two numbers do not equal. That tells us right away that no, these two fractions are not proportional. So proportional means, well, do they equal? And these do not. Well, the next set of directions asks us to find ratios equivalent to each ratio. So find a ratio, that just means 1. Then use the ratios to write a proportion. So these answers could vary. It kind of depends on how you do it. So when I look at this, 10/16, we could either do one of two things. We could either multiply by a factor of 1 or divide by a factor of 1. I'll do one way and the other the other. So I could have reduced this fraction, but I'm going to go ahead and multiply it instead. So you see 2/2 makes 1. See, makes this, think of this as like a giant 1. And there's my 1. 1 times a number doesn't change anything. So remember way back when you did multiplication tables, you know, like 3 times 1 equals 3, 4 times 1 equals 4. You always liked your 1s because it always equaled that number. It made the problem go quick. Well, this will be an equivalent fraction. So when we do this, all we're going to do is just multiply across. 2 times by 10 makes 20. And 2 times by 16, well, that makes 32. So you see, this fraction right here is a ratio that's equivalent to this. So that's what they're asking us here. Find a ratio equivalent to the ratio that's given. But then it says, then use the ratios to write a proportion. What's that? Well, proportion is when we have two fractions set equal to each other. So that's what we'll do next. 10/16 equals 20/32. And that's our proportion right there. Well, another example here, we've got 40/48. Well, what we can do is, instead of multiplying, I can divide. You don't have to multiply each time. You can divide by a factor of 1. So here, I'm going to divide this number by, let's go with 8. And I'm going to divide this number also by 8. And you see, 8/8 still is another factor of 1, another way to write 1. And so think of that as like a giant 1 there. And we're just doing a division problem. And so when I do that, I end up with 5 over, and then 48 divided by 8 makes 6. So there it is. That ratio is equivalent to this one. So I can write that as a proportion by just writing 40/48 equals 5/6. And there it is. There is our proportion. Well, the next set of directions, this is from Chapter 5, Section 4, and this is solving a proportion, so we're solving for this variable here using cross products. Well, we talked about cross products before. That's when we multiplied the numbers diagonal from one another. That's the same thing we're going to do here. So we're just going to take these numbers, 6 and z, and we're going to multiply those, so that makes 6z. And this is going to equal the cross product of 11 times 1, or 12 hundredths. So 12 hundredths. There it is. So what we'll have to do is multiply. So I know 11 times 12 is 132. But I need to move that decimal over 2 spaces, so that's going to make 1.32. And then I have 6z. So what I need to do next is solve by dividing, and divide by 6 on both sides. Now when I do that, off to the side, I'll go ahead and set up that division. So 6 into 1 and 32 hundredths. Well, 6 doesn't go into 1, so I put a 0 there, add the decimal point, and then I do 6 into 13. Well, that goes 2 times. And so 2 times 6 makes 12. So I do the subtraction, left with 1, and I bring down this 2, and I do the division. 6 into 12 goes 2 times. So there it is. Our answer is z equals, and then when we did the division, we got 22 hundredths. So that's solving using cross products. Well, we're going to use those cross products to set up an equation, or actually a proportion, also an equation, from these word problems. And number 20 is one of those. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to start by making a proportion. What I like to do is write the units that go in the proportion rather than just numbers initially, so I understand where things go. So it says if a CD, or if 8 CDs take up 3 1/4 inches of shelf space. How many CDs? How many? We don't know. That's going to be our unknown, like our X. How many CDs will fit on 65 inches of shelf space? So notice they talk about the same things. They talk about CDs, shelf space, and that's going to be our proportion. We're going to set up a proportion this way. CDs over shelf space. And then we're also going to set up another one of CDs over shelf space. And so that's going to be our proportion that we're going to set up. So again, I think the units help you out because then you can figure out where the numbers go. Most people think, okay, line equals sign line, I just stick numbers in there. But you got to be careful. You got to get the numbers in the right spot. So we'll set it up now. 8 CDs is to 3 1/4 inches of shelf space. And then we're going to set that equal to how many CDs? We don't know, but I know CDs go on top because that's what I'm setting up as my proportion. Will fit on 65 inches of shelf space, so I know the 65 goes down below. And see, now all I have to do is use my cross products. Once you set it up, you're ready to go. So again, the key is to set up a proportion without numbers, just units to start with, and then you can figure out where things go. So 8 times 65, write that out there, and then we're going to set that equal to x times 3 1/4. So 3 1/4 x. So we first need to multiply out those numbers, and so that makes 40. 8 times 5 makes 40, so I'll carry a 4. 8 times 6 makes 48, plus 4 makes 52. So 520 equals 3 1/4 x. So now I need to divide. Divide by 3 1/4. Well, here we have to remember some rules with fractions. So whenever we're dealing with mixed numbers, we need to change those to improper fractions. So what we've got here is we're going to divide 520 by 3 1/4. Well, I'm going to go ahead and change that right now, that 3 1/4, to an improper fraction. And also I'm going to write this 520 as a fraction eventually. But I'll do that in just a moment. Let me go ahead and change this. 3 times 4 is 12, plus 1 is 13 fourths. And then Again, treat this as a fraction, 520 over 1. So you can see, okay, I've got the two fractions here. But when we're dealing with fractions, what do? We take the reciprocal and multiply. That's what we do when we're dividing by fractions. So 520 over 1 times by, and then 4 over 13. So what we're going to do from this point is we are going to reduce. Now let's see if 13 goes into 52. I think it might. See, 13 times by 4. Let's see what that makes. That makes a 2, carry a 1. That makes 52. There it is. So it's 4 times. So 13 goes into 52 4 times, but I also have the 0 here, so it goes into 520 40 times. So I reduce the fraction there. And then all I have to do is multiply across. So I have 40 times by 4 makes, well, 4 times 4 is 16. Carry a 0 at the end. There it is. So what is 160? Well, go back in the chart here. That's why I like writing down the units. X was in the CDs space, so that's what it is. How many CDs? There it is. 160 of those CDs can fit on 65 inches of shelf space. So part 3, we'll go over the last few problems on tonight's homework.